This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation, welcome back to PTBN's NBA Team Podcast. After a prolonged absence for a variety of weird reasons that we can get into later, but we're finally back. We're getting to the end of the year, so we do have a little bit of ground to cover since we've been away for a while. I am one of your co-hosts, Andrew Riche. I am joined by Adam Murray, who I haven't seen because he's been scouring. This is what is one of the reasons why we had the delays. He went on a foreign escapade where he was looking for like podcast talent extraordinaire to replace me.
Well, for one, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Everybody says basketball doesn't matter until after Christmas, so we just said, all right, let's not overreact. Let's just sit back. Let's watch this weird season play out. And yes, I did have my little USO tour, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing was, I was in where was I? I was in the Bahrain airport, in the Manama airport, and they had basketball on TV of the Bahraini league, and who was playing? Wayne Chisholm, if you remember, from the Tennessee Volunteers.
Yeah, he was one of the headband boys with like the Smiths and like Jawan Smith and all those people.
It was just funny. I was telling my wife, there's got to be one player in this league I know. There's going to be one random person who's going to not fit in. It's like, oh, there he is. I'm like, oh, I know who he is.
Oh, basketball, I mean, it's truly global. Like, it's everywhere. I don't know if it's necessarily, like, at the forefront when you're in the Bahrain airport, but, there's always something going on.
No,
the crowds.
There's basketball, it's not as big. There was, like, maybe it was, like, D-League sized, couple hundred people in the crowd. But, it's just funny. Like, I'm still trying, I watched more of that, and then I just got grossly uninformed, and then I had to wait for Christmas to sort of bounce back and be like, okay, I'm sort of up, and then I just get shocked with random things. But now it's a new year, so instead of all the negativity which we've been throwing on teams, let's just say,
yeah, we missed our Christmas episode because, like I said, scheduled like you had your travels. My dumb ass got sick, so I couldn't really like put the energy in to do anything. But so we didn't do our Christmas episode, so no coal to throw around. Let me ask you this, though, so that we could just get the negativity and just flush it down the toilet. If you did have to throw your bag of coal at anybody, who would it have been?
Bag of coal for this year? It would just be. I don't really have a whole bag.
The Wizards.
No, the Wizards have driven the coal straight to their. They just, decided to take a nap in it. No,
Supermaxes?
No, because we knew that was going to happen. We knew it wasn't going to end well with them. The only ones who really get coal are just the ones who are just, like, shitting on it, shitting on the league, shitting on everything for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of, like, you have to have, Kevin Durant, everybody hates me. It's like, no, nobody hates you because you're good. Like, I don't think anyone's like, oh man, that Kevin Durant, he sucks. It's more like, man, Kevin Durant, we forget how good he is because he's wasted away with all this other super talent. You forget how effortless it is.
Well, here's the thing that's funny about Kevin. Well, first of all, it's any superstar. We could transition this really quickly into the talk about LeBron James with the Anthony Davis quotes. People get this idea like when NBA superstars are like unhappy or if they're just kind of pissed about something that they just kind of like throw it out there to the world to see if it sticks. When the truth is everything that these people do, they're surrounded by representatives and agencies and buddies who basically tell them everything that they should do. Everything they do is strategic. Everything they do has a purpose. So when Kevin Durant goes on one of these Bill Simmons podcasts trying to like be like, buddy with fans, well, obviously, it's a deflection from all the negativity because of the tiff he had with Draymond Green. It's obvious. And then you got LeBron James saying, I like to play with a lot of good players. It's not just Anthony Davis. Oh, then why did you bring up Anthony Davis? Oh,
Yeah.
is it maybe because his contract's coming up in about a year and he can opt out and he joined the same agency as you a year ago? Like, is that all just a coincidence? It's just I do find that very funny. It's like the Jimmy Butler stuff, which seemed like it was the wildest, weirdest story of 2018 in the NBA probably. But every step that story took had a very specific purpose. There was a reason why everything that happened.
It did, and then I don't know. No, there's the Cole was too bizarre of a season to have villains. I think it was just we've had oh wow, what an amazing victory. Then that was a horrible loss by it. We don't know any team that really looks really good. It's
well, not only that, I think it's the lack of consequences. I didn't feel like there was, because of the fact that the Warriors were so dominant in the postseason, outside of Houston when it looked like for a second like they might take it, it just didn't really feel like there was a lot at stake. Also, the fact that Gordon Hayward's injury and Kyrie Irving's injury sort of put the Celtics in that sort of I wouldn't call it laissez-faire because they got to Game 7 in the Eastern Finals, but it kind of gave them that sense of, oh, even if we don't make the finals, it's not our time yet. We can bide our time here. So it didn't feel like in the East, other than LeBron with the Cavs, that a lot of teams were really racing to the finish. I do feel like in 2019 that there is a little bit of urgency on both sides of the East and the West.
Well, now that we see everybody sort of faltering out of the gate, and really all the final scores are 125 to 120. So
scoring has exploded this year. Absolutely. I mean, it's been like that for the last 3 seasons, but this year I think the average scoring right now is at 110.
Yeah, this is the first year where nobody seems to care about playing defense. It's just, well, we're going to wait till the last 10, 15 games to really start playing, and this is just all let's just get some stats in there. Because there's no reason scrubs should be getting 15, 20 points a game. How are you scoring 15 points in 10 minutes? What the hell is going on here? Who's playing defense? And then you look at this.
You're seeing people play for the Bulls now. Fred Hoiberg has been fired. And we already had a mini mutiny between the Bulls players and which Boylan is this? Because there's Jim Boylan and then there was another Boylan that had been an assistant. Is this Jim Boylan?
Jim?
Yeah, Jim Boylan. And there was sort of a mini mutiny where the players didn't really respond to his change in strategy. And the
players didn't want to practice hard after a Sunday afternoon game or something. And
yeah, so he was sitting guys, and we're seeing guys play on the court for the Bulls that have no business in an NBA game. But the truth is that's been happening everywhere. We're seeing Mike Muscala for a very good Philadelphia 76ers team.
Yeah, that was another thing. Where you say he subs out all 5 guys, and then I think they interviewed Tony Parker. He's like, "Yeah, Popovich could do that because he's earned respect. This guy, you can't just come in and do that and expect your players to be like, oh man, we're going to play better now." Mm-hmm. So it's that Cleveland fired Tyronn Lue, who we know he had no business being there, but you can't pretend to be like we're going to be good and then just start tanking immediately. Phoenix fired their GM, rightfully so.
There was that really weird situation with the Kings where supposedly management, which is weird because they're actually having some success. There's actual optimism in Sacramento now. Talented team sort of on the getting there, but there's sort of word that there's some disagreement between management and Dave Joerger because Joerger's not playing Marvin Bagley enough, according to what management feels like, because they didn't pick Luka Doncic. And they're already hearing it from the fans of, oh, Bagley's going to be a bust. We missed out on Doncic. So they're trying to push Doncic's minutes. And Jorger's like, yeah, but that's counterproductive to the team this season. This season's team doesn't need Marvin Bagley. Bagley got hurt anyway, so he's out for a little while. But the whole point of it is there's already trouble in paradise.
Well, there's trouble because now all of a sudden they're 500, and now we have the unrealistic expectations again.
And then there's the credit blame corollary where it's like, oh, if this goes wrong, who's going to take the fall? And that's just one part of it. There's a whole slew of other happenings that we haven't really talked about that we might not even completely touch on. Chris Paul pulled his hamstring. He's going to be out for a while, but James Harden has just gone beast mode again in the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks, while the Rockets went on a winning streak to sort of save their season. The Thunder have really picked it up on defense. I think Paul George is probably the defensive player of the year right now. Would you agree?
Probably.
You got all those bigs like Gobert and, Anthony Davis and, even Kawhi Leonard, who's doing great things in Toronto. But, George just completely flipped the defense for the Thunder. Like, they were a respectable defense last year, but this year they're an elite level defense.
So let's just start with the vultures that circled New Orleans, and which sort of, created the rumor.
Which ones?
Created the drama. Now it's sort of like, well, you can't keep him.
We're talking about Davis.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is they were very thin in their depth anyway. So when Elfrid Payton went out with his injury, he came back immediately, got hurt again with I think his pinky finger or his ring finger. And he's out again. So just a little bit too much reliance that they have on guys like, Drew Holiday can get it done, so can Davis. But once you get behind them and, with Mirotich's injury issues too, now you got guys that you have to rely on like Solomon Hill and Tim Frazier, who they picked up off the street. And, guys like that. And that's just not a reason. Julius Randle's played well, but it's to a point where like you can't handle that. And it's almost turned into a one-man show where when Davis is off the court, the team just absolutely struggles. And, it becomes sort of this unreasonable. It becomes that unreasonable like situation like at Indiana was in with Paul George, where you're like, a move's going to be made eventually if Anthony Davis. All he has to do is say, "I don't want to be here anymore," and a move has to be made. But we're not there yet, and it feels like the media. I don't know if it's LeBron's people. I don't know if it's other GMs just sort of having wishful thinking, but I feel like they're floating out there a lot of fake news so that they can try to get someone to bite on the apple that maybe Davis wants to get out early and maybe he wants to try to make a deal to get here. And it feels like they're trying to like almost like dupe Dell Demps and the Bensons into making a deal that they don't want to make yet.
Well, it's a lot of New Orleans started terrible and is really in the bottom of the league right now and have no hope and don't have much future.
Now, with a grain of salt though, they are 14th in the West. But they're only 8.5 games out of first, and they're like 4 games out of the 8th seed. So it's not like the season is falling apart. It's not going the way it's supposed to. But if you look at their point differential, they're actually points plus 0.7. Like they're actually doing okay. They're not having a horrible year, is what I'm trying to say. Their road woes are very worrisome. They're 4-15. So there's a lot of things about the Pelicans that really worry you.
Okay, I figured we'd just start with them and let you have your...
Well, they had that home and home with Dallas, and, the home team won both games, but, that there was some optimism there where Davis had a great game with like 48 and 17. Doncic, I think in the game that they lost, he had 34, which so far is his career high. We could transition that a little bit into Dallas. You were high. I wouldn't say high on them, but you liked their prospects going into the season. You thought Dennis Smith would have his development. You thought that Doncic was a solid pick. And Doncic has been great for him, Would you call him a slam dunk for Rookie of the Year?
Definitely. He is just, his IQ alone is just off the charts, and of course it's way too early to tell, but it looks like one of those trades like, hey, we'll trade Antoine Jameson for Vince Carter. Hey, Antoine Jameson was pretty good for us, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. Why did you trade Doncic away? So you can get another pick, hoping you get a Luka Doncic type like player? It's not looking good for Atlanta at the moment.
No. Now I say that, and Dallas has lost 7 of their last.
Well, Dallas is going to eventually be Dallas. So there's not much they could do with if you're seeing Maxi Kleber and Powell getting tons of minutes. That's never a good sign. But it's just like, well, why are you signing DeAndre Jordan? Why you have Harrison Barnes on a max deal if you're developing? It's it's just strange personnel moves of like you're tanking and you're a bad team because you have like no shooting guard, and because Doncic is more of a point.
Yeah, and Nowitzki's back in the fold, but Nowitzki, this is this is career victory lap type of thing. Where I can't even look up his numbers right now, but it's probably less than 8 points a game.
It's like 8 minutes a game, and he's playing like 3 games.
He is barely playing. It's okay. That's it's okay to go out gracefully. Dwayne Wade in Miami, he's kind of in between. He has those games where he barely plays, and you see a whole lot of Justice Winslow and Derrick Jones Jr. and who's the one that has that arenas provision contract coming? Tyler Johnson. You see guys like that Miami play a lot, and then you'll have a game where Wade sort of does a flashback and he has maybe 28 points on 17 or 18 shots.
Yeah, and he'll have a good game, and that's sort of a microcosm of just how the NBA has sort of been this year of one game bad, one game good, but. Just going back to Dallas, we know they're not going to contend for anything, and he's going to hit the rookie wall. And Dennis Smith, there's already reports they're looking to trade. They're looking to upgrade from him already.
He's not a point guard, is what I think the problem is. And that's why they've had to rely so much on JJ Barea. As ironic as it sounds, a guy like Trae Young would have actually fit well with the Mavericks. Now you can't have your cake and eat it too. There was no way they were going to get Young and Doncic. They had to, they used Trae Young as the bait to get Doncic. So. Yeah. But he actually kind of would have fit well, to be honest. But when you got a guy who's averaging 19 points on, and almost 7 rebounds and 5 assists, that's for a rookie, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's just one of those things it looks like they can't play together. Oh well, but there's nothing wrong with Smith, and he has to take a step back only because Doncic took the limelight away. But
realistically, we just talked about two teams that are in the bottom half of the Western Conference. There's a whole lot of real estate ahead of us. We could talk about some of the surprises. The LA Clippers have been a pleasant surprise.
Well, the Clippers have been healthy.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of, you're up on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And
Montrezl Harrell's been a very good backup big man for them.
Montrez, they have a very deep bench of Montrez, Lou Williams, and they have their young guards there. Teodosic has been sort of relegated to the bench now because of the play of Alexander, and
Danilo Gallinari's also been healthy, which has been a pleasant surprise.
Gallinari's been healthy. Once he goes out, the whole team goes out. Plus, you lost Austin Rivers, so you have Gortat.
You say that like that's a good thing, Adam.
Because he was decent. He wasn't bad. Everyone was like, yes, he's the worst player. Statistically, he's terrible.
Well, and the misadventures of Austin Rivers is that he wound up in a trade. He got traded away by Washington. I think that was part of that botched deal where there was going to be a Brooks traded in Memphis, and it was the wrong Brooks. So they had to do a new version of the deal, and Austin Rivers was lumped into it. He got bought out by, who was it, Phoenix? Phoenix bought him out, and then the Rockets signed him, which was almost serendipitous because we already know the story about how Chris Paul hated the fact that Austin Rivers got so much playing time when he played with the Clippers because of Doc Rivers being his dad.
Yeah, and it's just the funny thing is they trade away Rivers, who they traded for. They traded Gortat away because he was part of the problem with the team. And they have a point guard. All of a sudden, John Wall's decided, look, I've had enough of this team. I'm done. I'm having this elective surgery. You got 6 months to figure out whatever you want to do.
Yeah, that's how I felt it was. I felt like they're saying, he's like, you know what, I'll be back in November of 19. Let's just see if you can make the team better because I'm not going anywhere in my contract and you can't move my contract. So we're not going to be trying to play chicken of whether or not I want to leave or not. I'm just going to take the season off with this injury. And if you want to fire Randy Whitman, who he's had some bouts with already this year, do it. You want to trade Brad Beal? Do it. But you got to make the team better once I come back. It's a power play.
It is a complete power play. And the funny thing is they have no point guard. And ultimately this comes down to one thing. And I think finally people are starting to come around. You shouldn't have re-signed Otto Porter. That was the biggest mistake. That put you in luxury tax territory. You lost all your players. You couldn't have any bench because you signed him. You got to dump Kelly Oubre because you couldn't pay him and you got nothing for him. You got, Trevor Ariza on his 1-year deal. So what good does Otto Porter do you?
Well, right now he doesn't. Now, I will say this for Ariza. He's actually... He's one of those guys that just fits well wherever he goes. Even in Phoenix, I felt like he wasn't completely tuned out. Like he
Trevor
tried.
Ariza?
Yeah, I thought Ariza's done. He did good things in Houston. The first time he was in Washington, he played well, and I feel like he can provide something for the Wizards. It's a lost season. I would say that for sure. I know that the bottom of the West is god awful, and they still might have a shot at the playoffs, but it is looking less and less likely for them. I'll say that for sure.
It's just funny. They're a luxury tax team, and they are like fifth worst.
But yeah, the Porter deal is not working out for them. That's my admittance. What about the Orlando Magic, who's ahead of there are a couple games ahead of the Wizards in there, but they're still behind in say if they hit the playoffs now, they'd be out of the playoffs. But at 15-19, with the way that Nikola Vucevic has played, Aaron Gordon's been sort of in and out of the lineup with an injury. That team is actually sort of overachieved in my opinion.
I do not understand the Orlando Magic, considering they had Jonathan Isaac and they doubled down with Mo Bamba. It's like, let's get more defense. They have no point guard whatsoever, and yet somehow they've turned themselves into a decent team. It could be moving Aaron Gordon to the 4, sort of clearing up the logjam there.
Do you think Vucevic having a contract year has helped them?
Well, Vucevic was always good. It was just the coaches that would bury him for no reason. And which we always kept wondering. He was part of it. Was him and Bobby Portis were like, why aren't these guys getting minutes? These guys are good. Or are we the only two that see this and nobody else is seeing? Like, how are they getting snubbed? And all of a sudden now he always was good.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they go through their spats. Like they lost 4 games in a row, but then they just gave an ass whooping at home to the Toronto Raptors. Now Lowry didn't play. But most of the rest of the Raptor team did, and they gave him a pretty good. I remember watching them play the Lakers and beat them in that one. Vucevic had 31 and 15 in that game. DJ Augustin, obviously, you can't keep relying on that. That's obvious. We talked about that already. Evan Fournier is still a consistent scorer. And then I think Terrence Ross is out. Am I right or wrong?
He's either out or just ineffective. I don't recall.
Yeah, but with Isaac and Bamba, who you talked about, they've actually gotten some production out of them. The problem is that Isaac is sort of positionless, and Bamba is just a straight shot blocker. He's almost like in the same mold that Bam Adebayo is in Miami, where you almost have to niche him in that lineup. You can't really play him anywhere but center.
Yeah, and they have stuff to figure out, and it's good that they're sort of doing something as opposed to just either usual flounder. But again, that's what a new coach.
Well, the new wrinkle with Steve Clifford's team is that they're just the Magic are not out of it yet. I think that's the genuine surprise. Like most times, by the time we get to the new year, the Magic are terrible and we don't really see any hope in them. This year's different. Like they actually might make the playoffs.
Probably not, but
yeah. I mean, the Detroit Pistons are weird because they started out pretty well under Dwayne Casey. Blake Griffin has had a really good year from the beginning this year, and I look at their standings and they're 16 and 17. Like, what is wrong with them? Is really what I'm trying to say.
They have no guard play. It's you're relying on Blake Griffin and Drummond to do everything, and you have Reggie Bullock who's overachieving and.
Yeah, he had a game winner in one of those wins that they had.
It's just Jackson and Kennard, and that's your backcourt, and it doesn't inspire confidence.
No, but I will say for Griffin, he's been terrific. I mean, I don't think he's like an MVP. He's a guy that you would consider, but he's not realistically going to win it. If I really had to put like a name on it right now, there's quite a few candidates right now, like Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James has been fantastic. Steph Curry before his injuries was playing really well, but I'd probably say it's Giannis right now. Giannis Antetokounmpo in Milwaukee.
Yeah, definitely agreed.
You would say that? Okay.
But just with Milwaukee, it's like I was saying yet again. Imagine this team with an efficient coach and had well-defined roles. All of a sudden, you watch them, it's like, this is a well-coached team. They know what they're doing. Antetokounmpo is MVP caliber player now. And then, of course, it's We know who they are, so they're probably going to start dropping out in playoff
Well,
time.
they've already kind of like played with their roster. They got George Hill in a trade with Matthew, where they sent Matthew Dellavedova back to Cleveland, and Hill's a guy who you can rely on as a veteran in the playoffs. We've seen a lot of DJ Wilson recently, which is kind of weird because even though he's a first round pick, we haven't really seen him a lot. He's got a weird looking man bun, and Dante DiVincenzo's been sent back down to the G League probably because of Hill being added to the lineup because Dellavedova was not getting a lot of playing time and Hill is. So they've sort of fortified their roster. It's almost to a point where they almost have too many pieces. Thon Maker will have a good game, but if he doesn't have a good game, it's not really much of a loss for them because they got Chris Middleton and Eric Bledsoe, and it's a pretty solid up and down team, very talented team. It's really Giannis that makes it go. If you look at the stat lines, the leader in points, rebounds, and assists almost every night is Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, and strangely enough, here they are at the top, dominant. But that mishmash unit, like I said, Thon Maker, DJ Wilson, they're all sort of honing into as opposed to, well, let's just go run around and see what you can do. This just is more on Jason Kidd.
Way more threes. Like they're like top 5 in threes made. That's I think the biggest part of it.
And it's just they're fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. We got a few things we can always hit on. The Indiana Pacers have won 8 of their last 10 games. Victor Oladipo's back in the lineup after having a knee problem. Sort of fortifying their position in the East as a playoff team. I didn't really doubt them as a playoff team. Did you? I kind of felt that they were going to be anyway.
Oh, of course they are.
And then you got the Philadelphia 76ers with Jimmy Butler. You had some interesting comments about how you feel like Butler, not necessarily the Minnesota thing because that's in the past now, but how Butler's fit already in Philadelphia, and you don't think it's necessarily for the best.
This was I don't know if we did this in our last episode when the trade just happened or it was before it, but this is what, they traded in all their assets from the process. This is it. They got their piece. And then it's kind of hard for Ben Simmons to do his thing as a point forward when Jimmy Butler needs the ball in his hand all times. What can Embiid do? He's not going to run pick and rolls if Jimmy Butler needs the ball in his hand all the time. So you can see where the frustration is coming with. But they're young players, so they don't know any better. They still think everything should revolve around me, as opposed to, look, everyone's going to get their touches, some win, some lose.
Do you feel like, here's the funniest part. People are saying, oh, well, Embiid is the one who doesn't really fit in the advanced metrics. Well, I'm looking at their game log, and Embiid is the leading scorer in all but like one of the last 8 games that they played. It's not like Embiid is like struggling to get points and get rebounds. He's still running pretty strong. But then there is that sense of like, does it fit as an offense philosophically when you see Butler? Because Butler is a guy that goes really hard. He likes to get into the paint. He likes to take on the best offensive player. So it kind of messes up the rotations on defense and transition and things like that. I guess you could say that, but when I look at the stats, I feel like the team is fit just fine.
Yeah, it is.
It's still a really good team. They lost on Christmas Day. Probably the best game on Christmas I saw was the one against the Celtics that went into overtime. Kyrie went for 40 points. We can sort of transition this to talk about Boston. That's your team. What do you feel like when you watch the Celtics? We can talk about the struggles with Gordon Hayward, where they're experimenting with having him come off the bench. Kyrie Irving is sort of asserting himself in the last month of the season, but not necessarily for the best results. They did have that 8-game winning streak, but then they followed it with 3 losses in a row, including one of the Suns, which is just like, wow. But what do you feel like when you watch the Celtics?
Boston is exactly who I thought they were. I've people at work have finally come around with me. They're just a team that needs everybody to be hot. They have everybody who needs the ball. And if they start missing shots, they can't rebound themselves back into the game. And it's just basically Kyrie playing hero ball again.
Let me ask you this. When you hear the words team meeting, do you get nervous?
No.
Not about the Celtics in particular, just in general, when you hear about that.
No, not really.
So what was the dynamic of this one? I mean, what was which loss sort of like turned that over where it's like, oh, we have to get together and talk about what's going on?
I think it was when they lost to the Knicks.
Okay.
Like a month ago. And it was just like, why are they losing to the Knicks? Like, you shouldn't be having these nobody shows up games.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, you look at their minutes they're given, and Hayward is just garbage right now. He has not come back at full strength.
No, he looks skittish is probably the best way I can put it. Tatum has been okay. Brown has sort of struggled. I mean, would you agree with that, or
Brown I don't want to say regressed, but all his stats have gone down.
Yeah, I'm being very kind when I say that because Jaylen Brown's super talented and he might turn it on in the playoffs like he did last year. But I just don't like what I've been seeing for the last maybe like month and a half out of him.
Yeah, he's been relegated to the bench and he's getting the thing about the problem is it's just their minutes. Like you re-sign Marcus Smart, he gets 20 minutes. Rozier 20 minutes. Jaylen Brown 25 minutes. And it's like you're still giving Hayward his minutes. It's like he's not that good right now. And you know, the injury to Baines and Horford was out. When Horford went out, that was just like the team was just sunk and couldn't do anything with him.
Yeah, too much Daniel Tice. Like now we didn't see a lot of Tice because he tore his Achilles last year, but playing him a little too much has become problematic for them. But Stevens is in love sometimes with those kind of like two big lineups where he's got at least a little bit of help because they've always been a poor rebounding team. So he always feels like he needs another big out there. But Tice is not a guy that you can rely on late in games.
He's good. He gives energy like Rebko did. It's just we shouldn't see him 30 minutes a game. And when Morris is your best player on the court, he's been the best player this year. It's just like that's never a good sign.
But just it was good to watch. I mean, here's the thing about the Celtics. They're good enough to beat the good teams. I know they lost to Milwaukee. They had that Thursday night TNT loss against the Rockets. But the Philly the Philly win was impressive. The win at Memphis that they just had was impressive because Memphis has been a solid team. Obviously, with the Grizzlies, what it really comes down to, and people can talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. and make all the jokes about which Brooks was going to be traded and blah, blah, blah. But really what it comes down to with Memphis is the health of Mike Conley and Marc Gasol. Because when they are on the court together, they are very hard to beat. But when one of them goes down, the team falls apart.
Basically, it's just, it's the health of...
The metrics prove it, too. Like, when they're both on the court, they're way in the plus. When one of them's off the court, they're in the minus. And when they're both off the court, it's decrepit. It's like what they were last year.
It's, Mike Conley is one of the most underrated players still out there. And, I'm going to give Memphis credit. And, we're like, why do they, keep their coach? And they really didn't have much of a momentum towards the end. It's like, no, they're playing as a team. And Jackson has fit in very well at the 4. Yeah,
JaMychal Green rebounds, and Kyle Anderson just does his slow-mo stuff. And
Kyle Anderson has been a good addition, and I think San Antonio made the wrong choice by keeping Bertans over Anderson.
That team's been fighting. I mean, we knew this with the Spurs. We talked about this. They're like right there on the fringe of the 8 spot with the Kings as we speak. But that's a team that fights, and you got at the end of the day. If you look on the court, you have DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. Like, if they both play well, you have a decent chance. But obviously with the injury to DeJounte Murray and other issues, the retirement of Manu Ginobili, there was a lot of things that got in the way this year. Derek White just recently came back. So, and Rudy Gay, I wouldn't call it the fountain of youth, but he's been a very good contributor for him this year versus last year.
You could say that, and that's all good and all, but that doesn't escape from the fact they're just around 500.
Yeah, and defensively they have some really awful games. That's the other thing about the Spurs.
And yeah, you could say, well, everybody's 500. Utah's 500. Memphis is 500. Well, I think they're like a game behind Portland, who is supposedly good. And it's just everybody's bunched up this year, but that's not what you expect out of a Spurs team.
The thing about Portland, I'm glad you brought them up, is that they're good enough when they're at their best to beat the really good teams, like the best teams in the league. But they are so susceptible to matchups. And we saw that with New Orleans in the playoffs. And I don't think that really changes. I think it's the same exact situation where if they play a team that just has an advantage at the small forward position or the center position with Josef Nurkic, like they are definitely like prone to like an embarrassing loss. But you watch them against, like the Clippers and the Mavericks and the one against the Warriors at Golden State where they kind of stole it in overtime. Like, they are capable of beating the really good teams, but then they have hit a lull every now and then.
They rely on their start. They have no bench either.
That's true.
So you're relying on their starters to do everything, and you just have to hope that McCollum and Lillard are both hot. And then they're unstoppable. And like I said, Nurkic is maturing. Like his numbers have gone down, but he's playing within himself.
Yeah, he's a fiery dude. But like you said, when you're relying on Steph's little brother Seth, I mean, he's a good player, but it's like it's when you have to rely on a guy like him and Nick Stauskas and Jake Layman a little too much, then obviously you're asking for problems. I think I remember watching one game. I don't remember if one of their big guards was out, but I was watching a lot of Wade Baldwin. And when you see that, that's when you're kind of worried about the Blazers every now and then. It's a solid team. I don't think, I definitely would say that Terry Stotts has coached himself out of trouble versus Randy Whitman, who is like very, very close to the chopping block. But I always feel like I have to reserve judgment about Portland ever since I watched that sweep against the Pelicans, because it's like you just never really know.
Yeah, and because it's the exact same team, because they have no money to really do anything. So with Portland, it's just you know what you're getting, and you just hope they're on. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Boston. It's like you know your team. It's just there's something, one little piece missing. Can they put up the next gear? Portland, I don't know.
And the thing that's weird, and the thing about the West, because of the way the standings have been so kind of like smudged between like spot 1 and spot 14, is that it doesn't really feel like it doesn't feel like we're sitting on our hands waiting for marquee matchups this year. Now a lot of people would turn that around and say, well, if you have if everybody's good and there's parity, that means every matchup's a marquee matchup, which we know is not necessarily the case. But it does feel like in the West, like for example, I'm looking at the Portland schedule coming up, like they play Philadelphia, but then they go to Sacramento, they play the Thunder, they play the Houston Rockets, and then they go on an East Coast road trip. But like, what it is like, I don't feel like any of those teams, like, it's like, oh, that's a must-watch game. You get what I'm saying? Like, I feel that way with the Lakers. Like, some people are trying to, like, make it out with the Lakers because of LeBron. Like, oh, this is the game to watch. And it's like, no, like, I had more excitement watching the Lakers without LeBron play the Kings than I did probably watching them play on the road against Golden State on Christmas Day.
It's just watching Cleveland West Coast. It's LeBron, and who cares who else he's playing with? It's just LeBron willing everybody through.
But you get my point. Like in the West, I don't feel like there's must-watch TV because all the teams are kind of in the same stratosphere. Is that a fair assessment?
Pretty much. There's a big clump.
I know Denver's played well, and the Warriors are the Warriors. Like I know there's rumors about DeMarcus Cousins already doing kind of like light workouts and getting ready. But we know they're going to turn it on eventually. I would say the Warriors are just bored. That would be my excuse. But the Nuggets have been really good. I know I'm missing a team at the top of the West team. Who else am I missing? Oklahoma City. Like there's a couple other teams that have been really good in the West. But I don't want to try to lump all of them together like the Nuggets don't deserve to be.
It's okay. You got Denver, there's Golden State, Oklahoma City, Clippers, Houston. And then if you want to put, Clippers in Houston, that's the top of the
and in the regular season gauntlet, like they can all get knocked off. Like, I mean, you could watch the Lakers, and when they lost to the Kings and the Clippers back to back, obviously without LeBron, but I wasn't surprised that they lost. Is what I'm saying. And when they beat the Golden State Warriors, I wasn't that surprised.
Well, just going back to surprises, about Sacramento. Mm-hmm. You already mentioned Bagley, but Bogdanovich and Buddy Hield are a nice 1-2. We'll start one, the other one will come off the bench. We could just sort of rotate them back and forth depending upon the day. Mm-hmm. Their Buddy Hield's looking pretty good.
Hield's got that quick release, and he's just turned into like a matchup nightmare when it comes to like I don't think he really comes off the bench anymore. I was talking to Todd Weber about this. They got him more in that starting spot where Bogdanovich comes off the bench. But Bogdanovich plays a lot of minutes once he comes off the bench. It's sort of like a Lou Williams type of situation. But Buddy is in that situation now where he's gained some body strength. He can play better defense. He's got a very quick release off the three-point line. And De'Aaron Fox, I'm going to tell you, man, I mean, when you're a rookie, sometimes like Luka Doncic is an exception this year. And then you have some other rookies that really, really stand out. But when you're a rookie, you're just kind of feeling yourself, trying to figure out what you can do. In his second year, De'Aaron Fox, when he goes on the court, outside of maybe just a few times, he's probably the best point guard on the court.
He's the fastest point guard on the court.
Mm-hmm. Crazy athleticism, good defender.
All these elite point guards we had a few years ago, they're all starting to slow down a little bit. So he's moving up. So that's it.
And a talented team. Like, you got Yogi Ferrell behind him. Harry Giles is in the G League developing. And he does have some moments where where Giles does get some playing time in there. Willie Cauley-Stein's been good. Iman Shumpert being like a veteran leader is the most shocking thing I've seen this season. I did not expect that.
Yeah, I was just waiting for his buyout, and then
that's what I thought too. Justin Jackson from UNC, he's been good for him. Bielika or Bielisa, however you say it. They're at a point where they could probably trade away guys like Frank Mason and Scott Labissiere and try to get some value out of it if they want to make a playoff push.
They really could, which is very strange. And teams we haven't mentioned yet, you briefly touched on Denver.
Mm-hmm. Just a really good team. And a deep team. Like, how many teams can afford to lose their starting shooting guard, which they did with Gary Harris, and their best six-man, Will Barton, and they can just plug him in with somebody like Malik Beasley and Juancho Hernan-Gomez and not really miss a beat? That's not easy to do.
It's amazing what you could do when you get rid of Fareed and Wilson Chandler, how it just cleared up the logjam.
Yeah, the biggest key for them is that they're 14-3 at home. They're very hard. The Joker is hard to beat in Denver.
Extremely. Utah.
They're weird. Like that was the late Christmas game against Portland. They actually won that game. But we also have memories of I always forget this one, but I know it happened this season. They had a game where they lost by like 50-something points. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, they lost big. And
they've had some embarrassing losses. I know there's been a lot of talk about Donovan Mitchell not sharing the ball. The Kyle Korver deal, which we didn't talk about because it happened while we were out, obviously that helps them because you needed three-point shooting in the worst way. So that's been a help for them. Mitchell has been consistent. Gobert being in the lineup's been fine. The thing about the Jazz is that when they play better, I don't think they make adjustments to their roster. It's just the same roster.
No, it's the same thing. It's very hard to judge because Exum's going to get his few minutes, and Inglis is going to he's starting, and then Raul Neto's going to get a spot, few minutes here, and then what do we like?
Dante
Dark Favors?
Exum, yeah,
do we like him or not? They're very up and down, and I think they sort of put too much pressure on Mitchell to be an MVP now, save us. And
yeah, and the East is kind of weird. There were a couple teams that we didn't really go in depth about. Like I didn't talk too much about the Pacers or the Raptors.
Yeah, we'll get to the East. We're almost done with the West. Let's just quickly go through them real quick. Minnesota, we mentioned their dysfunction.
Robert Covington
Wiggins is now coming at the fans. Covington and Saric. Good.
Covington has played very well for them. I'll say that.
Saric has disappeared.
Wiggins had that very weird game where they lost to the Hawks, and he just looked out of it, and he got booed, and he basically gave it back to the fans in an interview where he basically said, "Fuck y'all." Not a good reputation to have.
No, not Thibodeau. That's pretty much it. And Phoenix with their 17 small forwards.
That's just a weird team. I don't know what to say about the Suns. They're 9-28.
You wanted to talk about Ayton, how he's
just
overshadowed.
Just tank for Zion, and let's just move on. That's all I'm thinking of when I think of the Suns. Just tank for Zion or RJ Barrett.
Wait, which one of those is going to be the small? They're not small forwards.
Well, you know what's funny? Zion's like 6'7". He don't play like 6'7" though.
No, he does, and that's the thing is he'll be.
You're not getting Justin Jackson. Justin Jackson was a guy who was like 6'11", but he plays like a guard. And some people say that like it's a compliment, like Giannis Antetokounmpo, of course. Like the thing that's crazy about Giannis Antetokounmpo, he created the Euro dunk. Everyone talks about the Euro step, kind of like that two-step, like long stride thing. He put into play the Euro dunk. Now you have the two-stride dunk down the lane if you don't like position yourself right on defense, and you're going to get embarrassed. Being a 6'11" guy with a multitude of like guards / wing skills is great. But then when you're a guy like Josh Jackson who can't figure it out, you're just wasting the talent.
Speaking of embarrassing, can we just sort of skip over the East?
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned a good deal.
We can skip the bottom of the East. I have no desire to talk about the Cavaliers. I know they had they snuck in a couple of wins there. I think they had one against the Pacers where they somehow won on a tip in by Larry Nance Jr. And the Chicago Bulls are just embarrassing. Wendell Carter Jr. has played well. That's all I can say.
Then the Knicks.
No. Pass.
Do you see Moutier starting and getting minutes, and Frankie is not playing?
They just stopped playing on Christmas. Can I just ask for that alone and get my wish?
That's just the noon throwaway game, anyways.
They got blown out by the Bucks, but Kevin Knox has played more. There's word that Porzingis is getting ready to come back, or he's getting ready to get tested out. So I'm a Porzingis mark. I love him. So I think that if he comes back, maybe they'll creep up, but they got the same record as the Phoenix freaking Suns. The worst record right now in the league is Cleveland. They're like a game worse than Phoenix and New York.
Yeah. We've mentioned Atlanta briefly with Young.
John Collins has played well. I'll say that.
He's played well. We've mentioned Washington. We've mentioned Orlando. We mentioned Detroit. We got Brooklyn on the upside, looking good.
Think of the Spencer Dinwiddie extension.
I was surprised that he locked in for that.
It was sort of like Lou Williams. Remember when Lou Williams signed it in like April of last year, and we were sort of surprised because we thought he would try to explore his options. Dinwiddie, I guess, was happy with the minutes he gets in Brooklyn. He trusts the coaching staff, and he didn't feel like he was going to get any more than that in the open market, so he just decided to take the deal. I don't have the salary in front of me. I want to say it's somewhere around $8 or $9 million a year.
I don't know what it is, but I was just surprised. I'm like, he could have gotten. I thought he would have gotten paid more. He would have been when people swung and missed on the big guys. He would have been.
I think if his agent played hardball, he could have gotten in the double-digit salary. I would say that.
He could, especially with D'Angelo Russell there. Look, he's up for extension too. We mentioned Detroit, how they're just sort of mishy-mashy. Miami is always going to be Miami.
There's one guy I did see for that because you're big on the foreign guys. That I did see for Brooklyn that did impress me. His name is Rodion Kuruc. He's actually pretty good.
Both the Euros are pretty good. Kuruc,
the other one's been injured. I think his name. I forget his name.
Devin Asawa.
Musa. Yeah, he's out. He's out with injuries. But
Cruz, it's a Clint Capella thing. I'm coming over this year. No, we'd like you to stay where you are. No, I'm going to come over. Okay, so he falls in the draft, and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, he's really good. He should have gone higher. Well, yeah, we know he should have gone higher, but we didn't want to draft him because we wanted to stash him.
The Spencer Dinwiddie deal is 3 years, $34 million, so he just got over double digits.
He still could have gotten more, I think, somewhere else, but good for him.
Awesome.
He
Miami,
found a home. He's happy.
Miami, we talked about a little bit. They are what we thought they were. Just like you said with Boston, 17-17. Good defensive team, solid roster up and down. We'll see if Dion Waiters will be ready to play in the new year. I kind of doubt it. Do you think? You think we're going to see Waiters?
Back to Waiters, Silver just said all. He'll play. It's just I don't think he'll be any effective.
Kemba Walker is just predictably on freaking fire, like NBA Jam style for the Hornets. They did have that one weird one that we didn't talk about, where Jeremy Lamb hit a game winner, but Malik Monk almost got a technical foul. Am I saying this right?
No, Malik had a turnover.
Yeah, he was celebrating, and Michael Jordan slapped him on the back on the bench. That made me laugh. Monk's weird, but he has some of those games where he's really, really good. The one who's been disappointing in me is Cody Zeller. I just haven't really seen the development from him under James Borrego, whereas I've seen guys like Nick Batum's had some good games. I mentioned Lamb, he's played well. But the main guy there is Walker. Walker is he's playing to the level where he might get max money in the summer.
Well, it's one of those. It's like New Orleans. It's like he has to go for 40 in order for the team to have a chance.
That's correct.
Which is sort of a shame. But
I mean, you saw the Philly game. They lost that game on a Jimmy Butler buzzer beater. But I mean, how many points? Was it 60?
Yeah, it was up there. But Zeller. Don't forget, last year he was. He got shucked aside for Dwight Howard, and all of a sudden, well, okay, now you're back in the starting lineup. Well, what do you mean you're inefficient now? I just yanked you last year for no reason, and now you don't have it. And Charlotte's just they can't keep that team.
Well, I think they're just. I mean, offensively they're better than they.
Well, offensively they're better because they moved Lamb to the starting lineup. They moved Kid Gilchrist. Thankfully, said I'll come off.
He's
the
in
bench.
The doghouse, basically. Yeah.
No, he volunteered for it. Which is, good because we mentioned him and Batum are the same player. You can't have the same player on the court, so he changes it up. And, Charlotte, yay. But, last up, like you said, Indiana. The team that nobody really wants to talk about.
Well, they're boring. They're probably the most boring team, outside of the Spurs, they're probably the most boring team in the NBA. But they're, like, very efficient type of boring. Like when they win it, you're not surprised. Like when they lost to Cleveland, I was legitimately shocked. I couldn't believe they lost the game. Now they turned around and they lost the game by 3 points at Toronto, but I mean, come on. The Toronto Raptors might be the best team in the East, not named Milwaukee. We can actually transition that now. Do you think Milwaukee is better than Toronto?
Milwaukee's hotter than Toronto right now. Toronto has a better.
Good thing we don't play the NBA playoffs in January, right?
Toronto has a better team overall, but Milwaukee has the momentum behind them.
Is Toronto the deepest team in the league? It's either them or Denver.
Well, the deepest team in the league is Boston. The problem is they're too deep, and they can't figure it out.
Here's the problem with Boston. I think they're having so much trouble making the pieces fit. That's a definition of depth. Am I right or wrong?
That's, again, you're too deep. We have too many pieces. Denver, let's get rid of some. Toronto, okay, we need to get rid of our DeRozan, who's going to do DeRozan things. Let's bring in somebody who brings a different skill set. And, who's brought out wonders in Pascal Siakam. He's having this resurgence out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. We didn't talk about this. Do you think that Kawhi laugh is like a solid meme? Do you think that one can last throughout the year?
No, I don't think the memes are just
round ball. Kawhi is pretty good though.
Yeah, it's good, but none of them can last anymore. I think those days of they all burn too quick.
Well, NBA Twitter is solid. Like they usually generate some pretty good ones. I mean, I know there's a few. I think the new ones are like Bird Box memes. I'm sure that we'll find one in the NBA really soon about like somebody not playing defense.
Oh, that's John Wall.
Yeah, we'll figure something out.
He refused to move. He passed the ball, just stood there and didn't move.
That was Otto Porter.
No, it was Wall this year. Otto Porter was.
There was a new one. There was a new Shaq and a Fool this year.
No, it wasn't Shaq and a Fool where he missed the inbound pass. Wall brought it up, passed it off, and then just stood in his spot.
No, I did see one play where literally nobody took the trailer. I think it was actually it was one of those big white guys. It wasn't Domantas Sabonis, it was another guy. But he literally just went straight to the basket and nobody guarded him because there's this obsession now with like closing the arc. Like, oh, you got to run out to the shooters. Well, no one's guarding the middle anymore. That's, I think, one of the biggest problems. Like, if you do not have the shot blocker out there anymore, basically the middle is wide open. Why do you think we've seen all these games where Kyle Kuzma just gets these ferocious dunks for the Lakers? Yep. It's just I'm not trying to say here's the only thing I would say that is definitely a misconception about the NBA this year because of the scoring going up so high. There's this misconception that like NBA players can't play defense. That is so far from the truth. NBA players can play very good defense. They just have to have the motivation to do so.
Yeah, they're not going to do that now, and they're not going to put.
And they have to be in the right position to do it. Like the Warriors, when they get dialed in, they play great defense. They just have to be motivated to do so. For some reason, they were not motivated to do it on Christmas. But
nobody's motivated right now, and that's the thing.
And when the best team in the NBA isn't, that's not good. The Celtics, it looks like they're trying to find something to push them over the edge, and they don't have it yet. That's the funny part.
But we should be wrapping up here. Anything you have going looking forward?
No, I mean, the schedule's, like I said, there's always some games on the schedule because of the way that the standings are all kind of like bundled together. You know, like if you look at Toronto, you got like a game at Milwaukee on January 5th. Like there's always some good ones that you're looking forward to, but there's not like a marquee matchup. I feel like with the Lakers, we were sort of robbed because I felt like they were sort of hitting their stride, and then LeBron had the groin strain. And this is the first time since his knee problem, like late in 2014 with the Cavs, where he's missed significant time. So
it's something, yeah.
Yeah, at least 6 or 7 games, which is very, very rare for LeBron. So now with the Lakers, you know, they've lost 2 or 3 in a row, and you know, some people would call that floundering. But you know, they were kind of finding their footing. I'm just curious in the West of which team, if we start seeing a little bit of separation, if like the Timberwolves make a move, if Dallas kind of falls apart, if the Memphis Grizzlies make a push. Like, I'm sort of curious as to which one of those teams will eventually falter, because I do feel like because of the way that the means average out, there's about 2 or 3 of those teams between San Antonio, Memphis, Utah, Dallas, and Minnesota, and New Orleans. I think 3 of them by the end of January will not be in it anymore.
So it should be a very interesting trade deadline then.
That's correct.
All right.
So,
welcome to 2019. Let's be positive this year.
well, we're never positive.
We could just try. It all falls apart, but
No, I mean it's gonna be an interesting one. On behalf of Adam Murray, this is Andrew Riche. Take care, everybody. See you later.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
PlayStation Nation's Justin Rosero and Chad Kimball here. We want to let you know that we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlayStation.com, and we now offer them to you on 2 great feeds. On the PlayStation Wrestling feed, we bring you The Mothership, the Place to Be podcast, Main Event, Survey Says, Wrestling Warzone, a Monday Night Wars podcast retrospective, No Holds Barred, Jeff Learns Wrestling, and our monthly pay-per-view reaction shows. On top of that, we're also dipping into the vault, re-releasing the entire catalog of where the big boys play for your enjoyment. In addition to these full-length shows, we also deliver special network pod blasts on topics old and new.
The Place to Be Nation Pop feed is loaded with great content, offering such tremendous shows covering the land of pop culture, such as Geek and Sassy, Talkin' Pop, the Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular, Sunday Groove, PTBN Play, Freak Out Drive-In, Songs with Friends, Looking Forward, Looking Back, and Lucha Undead, as well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans with the hard-traveling fanboys, Sellers Points, Conversation Comics, DC Post-Crisis Management, Marvel Age, and Marvel Age Masterclass, plus weekly pod blasts that cover the gamut of comic topics. The feed is also filled with insightful sports content, including the NBA team, This Week in the NFL, and more.
And you can find all these current shows, plus archives of our past podcasts, including The Kevin Kelly Show, as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while there, be sure to rate and leave feedback as well. All of these shows, plus others available at PlayStation.com. We cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, in-depth stretch projects, and more. Be sure to support our site by using PlayStation.com/Amazon while doing your online shopping. And download our free PTB Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks via the links on our site. We also want to thank our friends at Boneheads Wing Bar, ProWrestlingOnly.com, and TheHistoryOfWrestling.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlayStation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.